This is absolutely the most absurd blackmail in the world. After Lin Ling said, "Give me 1 million," she dismissed the matter as if it were nothing. For the next hour, she endlessly talked about her newly written novel to Liu Yan, the writer she had secretly admired for years. And to her surprise, Liu Yan actually fell for it, listening attentively. Unfortunately, although they hit it off, both of them were secretly trying to bring the other down. Phone harassment, throwing paint, writing big characters. Lin Ling thought the debt collectors were out of ideas, but they escalated things by hiring a group of thugs with tattoos of dragons and tigers. They chased her for 2 whole kilometers in the streets. She ran until her brain felt deprived of oxygen, thinking this was the end of the world. Her phone was out of service, and she couldn't even call the police. Luckily, this alley was one she knew well. She ditched her high heels, took a turn, and hid behind a half-tall grease trap at the street corner. The nunchucks and beer bottles whizzed past her, but it was just a few seconds, and they cursed, realizing they had let her escape. The curses grew fainter as they disappeared. Lin Ling finally breathed a sigh of relief. It was all her damned father's fault. No, she shouldn't be thinking like that now, because he was already dead. After his death, he left her a huge debt, 80,000, with endless interest. She couldn't even cover the interest. The smell of the grease trap was suffocating, and she wanted to throw up, but her stomach was empty, and only bitter bile came up her throat. She felt dizzy, unable to leave the disgusting place that only rats seemed to enjoy. It was in those few seconds that she stumbled upon a shocking secret. The old street was being demolished. Most people had already moved out, and except for the leaders at the demolition office, no one cared anymore. The Chengjiang Hotel, standing for 50 years, had also become half-dead, its only use being to accommodate the occasional idiot tourists who wandered into the alley and didn't want to turn back. But today, Lin Ling saw a familiar face at the hotel's entrance. It was Lin Ling's only special follow on the internet, famous writer Liu Yan. She was leaning into the arms of a young man, clearly drunk and stumbling. When Lin Ling looked closer, she was stunned into forgetting to breathe. The man supporting Liu Yan was not her husband, Pu Lizha, an overeducated, self-righteous man who loved to give online lectures about the world. This man had nearly 200 pounds and a bald head, with no resemblance to the handsome young man in front of her, aside from their shared gender. Liu Yan was cheating. She and Pu Lizha were one of the top intellectual model couples online. They had not only appeared on a couple's travel variety show, but also co-authored a best-selling book about marriage and relationships. Just yesterday, on their 10th wedding anniversary, Lin Ling had written a long post publicly thanking her husband, but tonight, Liu Yan was in a hotel room with another man. If the news about her infidelity was exposed, the consequences would be unimaginable. These rich people would do anything to maintain their perfect public image, hiding the lice under their luxurious robes. In just a moment of hesitation, Lin Ling took a photo. With evidence of Liu Yan's affair, she now had leverage. A ridiculous plan began to take root in her mind. Liu Yan had always been Lin Ling's special follow because Lin Ling admired her books. Not those self-help marriage books co-written with Pu Lizha, but Liu Yan's early novels and travel memoirs. Back in high school, Liu Yan had already been her idol. Lin Ling owned all of her works and had even crossed cities to attend her book signing and lectures during college. It was Liu Yan who sparked Lin Ling's deeper love for writing, inspiring her to one day dream of seeing her own book on the shelves. Maybe it was due to bad luck or a lack of talent, but all her submissions had sunk without a trace. What she thought would be her breakout ideas had become nothing more than ignored rubbish. Finally, she got her chance. Without hesitation, she clicked into Liu Yan's social media profile and sent her a private message. The conversation was filled with clumsy but sincere praise she had sent in the past. Unfortunately, Liu Yan had never replied. But this time, Lin Ling was certain Liu Yan would respond. She sent the photo she had taken the day before along with her phone number. And then began the long wait. Lin Ling felt the same anxiety she had when she first submitted her work, checking her phone constantly, afraid of missing a message. But the whole afternoon passed, and her private messages were still just her talking to herself. Unable to wait any longer, Lin Ling sent another message. "If you don't reply, I'll go find your husband." The threat worked. Within 10 minutes, Lin Ling's phone rang. The caller was an unknown number, and she almost eagerly answered it. There was silence on the other end. After waiting a while, the voice finally spoke. "I'm Liu Yan." The cafe where they agreed to meet was carefully selected by Lin Ling, quiet and secluded, perfect for negotiation. Above them, a TV looped a news report. A female graduate student, overwhelmed by academic pressure, jumped from a university building. The anchor's voice was indifferent, but Lin Ling felt a pang of sorrow. In her 20s, what a beautiful age. How could she have been driven to such despair? Liu Yan was punctual. As soon as they met, she got straight to the point, asking, "How much do you want for the photo?" Lin Ling thought they would argue, but Liu Yan was surprisingly direct. This left Lin Ling at a loss. While Lin Ling was momentarily distracted, Liu Yan took off her sunglasses and hat, fully exposing herself to Lin Ling. Her idol was so close, and Lin Ling suddenly felt a deep sense of awe. The debt was suffocating her, and she finally gathered the courage to set her terms. 1 million. Liu Yan didn't even blink. "Not a problem, but I can't pay you all at once. If I transfer the money from my account, my husband will see it. If he asks about it, I won't be able to explain. Here's what I'll do. I have a few payments coming in for some articles, so I'll arrange with the publisher to send the money directly to your account, 20,000 per payment, 5 installments. If that works for you, just give me your account details." While Liu Yan spoke, Lin Ling kept her eyes fixed on her, trying to read any hint of deceit. But Liu Yan's gaze was calm, almost lifeless, and Lin Ling could read no emotion there. With no other option, she chose to trust her. "I have a second condition. I suggest you don't go too far. I wrote a novel. You help me get it published." Lin Ling's voice trembled as she said this, but she steeled herself. "I know this isn't hard for you." "Novel." At that moment, Lin Ling noticed something shift in Liu Yan's previously indifferent gaze, a ripple of interest. "Where's the manuscript? I need to take a look first." Lin Ling was moved by her response. If this were just a simple blackmail, she could fulfill the terms and be done with it. Money and nothing else. But Liu Yan, at this moment, was taking on a professional demeanor. They exchanged contact details, and Lin Ling sent the digital manuscript from her phone. For the next hour, Liu Yan barely spoke. She was so focused, reading through a third of Lin Ling's manuscript. As evening fell, Lin Ling realized the streetlights had begun to glow outside. "How is it?" Lin Ling asked nervously. "Did you write this?" Lin Ling nodded. To prove it, she added, "The setting is my hometown, a village in Guizhou, Honghe, Yunnan. I'm not lying." After a long silence, Lin Ling asked again, "So, can you help me get it published?" Without responding directly, Liu Yan looked out at the darkening night outside. It was late, but she no longer seemed desperate to leave. Another hour passed, and Liu Yan engaged in an absurd discussion about the content of the book with Lin Ling. Their interaction no longer felt like that of a blackmailer and a victim. It had even become somewhat harmonious. Finally, the cafe was about to close. "I can help you get it published." Lin Ling froze. "Your writing is good." With that, Liu Yan put her hat and mask back on, paid, and within moments, vanished into the gray street like a fleeting shadow. Lin Ling's heart fluttered. Suddenly, she felt a pang of guilt, because Liu Yan was the first person to say her writing was good. She should have been grateful. But in the next moment, a wicked thought crossed her mind. If she wrote Liu Yan's story, would she receive unprecedented attention? When she returned home, there were a pair of white sneakers sprawled at the doorstep, crooked and askew. "Zhang Yan, you still know how to come home." Lin Ling shouted, and a man emerged from the side bedroom, freshly showered and lounging lazily, calling her sis. "What have you been up to these past few days?" Zhang Yan put on a tank top, chewing betel nuts, and lazily responded, "Making money. Once everything's settled, we'll pay off the debt." "Always making money, making money. If you didn't cause so much trouble, I'd be burning incense to thank the gods. Didn't you say you were going to study for the graduate exams? I haven't seen you read a single book." "Graduate exams? Haven't you seen the news? The suicide rate among high-achieving students is incredibly high. I just want to live a few more days." Zhang Yan said with an odd smile, "There's a photo of that suicide girl online. She's quite pretty, what a pity. Shameless." Zhang Yan just curled his lips and didn't respond further. That was how things went. Sitting in front of her computer, Lin Ling typed away, documenting her first meeting with Liu Yan. In the early hours, she received a message from Liu Yan asking for her bank account number. After sending it, she fell into a deep sleep, only to be woken by her phone vibrating again in the early morning. A transfer of 200,000 from an unfamiliar account had arrived. For a moment, she thought she was seeing things and bolted upright to check the balance. It wasn't a dream. Then a text arrived. Liu Yan asked her to meet the next day to discuss the book publishing. It was the same cafe as before, and Liu Yan was still fully covered. For some reason, this time, after sitting down, she never took off her sunglasses. Before they met, Lin Ling had carefully printed out the manuscript, and when Liu Yan sat down, she eagerly handed over the physical copy. The eyes behind the sunglasses remained lowered, but Lin Ling caught a flicker of surprise. Noticing Liu Yan hesitate for a moment before accepting the manuscript, Lin Ling said, "I remember you mentioned in an interview that you're not used to reading ebooks. You prefer physical copies, right? You've followed me before?" "Of course, you're my favorite author." Before the coffee arrived, they were already deep in conversation. Liu Yan asked Lin Ling many questions about the creative ideas behind the book and the obscure Han language in the content. Lin Ling answered willingly, seeing these questions as a form of admiration. She didn't think much of it. As the evening wore on, the sunlight outside the floor-to-ceiling window turned the highway into a rose-colored ribbon, distant and dreamy. Lin Ling was the first to gaze out into the distance. Liu Yan followed her gaze. The world through the sunglasses was blurry and heavy. After a moment's hesitation, Liu Yan finally removed them. The sunset in the distance was like a ball of fire. Suddenly, Lin Ling smelled something burning, faint but real. The shrill sound of a train's horn cut through the air. The familiar, uncomfortable feeling swept over her body in an instant. "Ah!" It was Lin Ling who screamed. In the blink of an eye, the calm woman before her started to convulse violently, collapsing to the ground and foaming at the mouth, like a fish on the verge of death. Instinctively, Lin Ling regained her composure after the scream, pulling Liu Yan to the floor, laying her flat, and gripping her chin tightly. She removed the betel nut that hadn't been chewed properly from her mouth. In that moment, as the distance between them closed, Lin Ling uncovered a secret. She finally understood why Liu Yan always wore sunglasses. Despite the makeup, the foundation couldn't hide the large purple bruise on her temple. The hospital room was silent when Liu Yan woke up, just before dawn. The moment she opened her eyes, she had no memory of what had just happened. Lin Ling, who had been yawning next to the bed, let out a sigh of relief when she saw Liu Yan wake up. "You scared me to death." "It's an old problem," Liu Yan said calmly. "Thanks for saving me." A few seconds of silence followed, and Lin Ling remembered something similar from her childhood. She didn't want to bring it up, but still said, "My father had the same issue, so I know a bit about first aid." To show her gratitude, Liu Yan invited Lin Ling to her house for a meal. Lin Ling was about to refuse. She knew her position. She was a blackmailer, and it wasn't appropriate to get too close to the victim. The refusal was on the tip of her tongue, but then she quickly changed her mind and swallowed the words. "Sure." She couldn't help but be curious. What secrets was this woman hiding? And where had that injury on her temple come from? The next morning, Lu Yan was discharged from the hospital. They drove to the villa she owned on the outskirts. Through conversation, Lin Ling learned that Lu Yan had bought the house herself. Pu Lizha doesn't know about this place. It's my secret base, Lu Yan said. Lin Ling was flattered but confused. Why would Lu Yan bring her to such a private place? And then, a deeper question struck her. If Lu Yan had her own house and Pu Lizha didn't know, why did she need to go to a hotel to have an affair with him? Wouldn't it be more convenient to cheat in her own home? More and more doubts flooded Lin Ling's mind, but she couldn't ask. She could only quietly observe Lu Yan. The doorbell rang and Lu Yan flinched but didn't move. Lin Ling opened the door first, holding a transparent box with a freshly made cake inside. I know today's your birthday. I saw it when I was checking out at the hospital. There was a long silence, and Lin Ling saw a fluctuation in Lu Yan's eyes. Lu Yan wiped her hands on her apron, looking a bit flustered, and hesitated before not taking the cake. When Lin Ling lit the candles, Lu Yan looked down and made a wish. Then she quietly said, "Thank you." Seeing Lu Yan's surprised expression, Lin Ling didn't understand. Why would a woman who already had money and success be so happy about giving a stranger a cake on her birthday? Her life seemed far from as dignified as it appeared on the surface. Less than a week after that day, the second payment was transferred into Lin Ling's account. When she received the text, she was idly scrolling through Lu Yan's social media, checking out her latest post. She was attending a book signing event with her husband at a bookstore in the city center. Lin Ling felt a sudden urge to go and see Lu Yan, but more than that, she wanted to see her husband. What role did he, the man who was always kept in the dark, play in Lu Yan's life? She stood at the end of the long line holding the couple's new book. Her gaze constantly shifted between the two of them. They appeared inseparable, yet there was always a strange atmosphere around them. As the line grew shorter and they drew closer, Lin Ling wondered if Lu Yan had noticed her presence. Suddenly, someone in the line rushed toward Lu Yan, and a commotion erupted ahead. Lin Ling snapped out of her thoughts, and luckily, at that moment, Pu Lizha had already shielded Lu Yan with his own body. In the crowd, it was like a bomb had gone off, causing everyone to scatter in panic. Someone shouted. He threw sulfuric acid. Lin Ling's heart leapt to her throat. An assailant had snuck into the event and, full of hatred for Lu Yan, threw an entire bottle of sulfuric acid at her face. Fortunately, Pu Lizha reacted quickly and blocked the attack with his body. Lu Yan was rushed away in an ambulance. After she was hospitalized, Lin Ling saw the latest news report, which stated that the sulfuric acid was diluted and caused no major harm to them. However, Lu Yan had fainted from shock, and Pu Lizha stayed by her side in the hospital, his eyes filled with tears as he spoke to reporters, vowing to severely punish the madman who had hurt his wife. His reddened eyes and slightly trembling hands made Lin Ling believe that the man in front of her must love his wife deeply. But the next day, when Lin Ling visited Lu Yan in the hospital, she received a completely different story from the woman herself. At first, Lin Ling hesitated. After all, she wasn't particularly close to Lu Yan and they didn't move in the same social circles. If she visited her suddenly, it might cause unnecessary trouble. But then she received a message from Lu Yan. I saw you at the signing event. If you have time, come visit me. With those words, Lin Ling couldn't resist her curiosity. She closed her computer, eagerly anticipating what Lu Yan might say to her when they met. When she arrived at the hospital room, Pu Lizha had just left. Only Lu Yan was in the room. Her face didn't have any obvious scars, just some redness. Lin Ling breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that she was fine. I asked you to come because I want to talk about the book. I finished reading it and there were some things that didn't make sense, along with a few awkward sentences. I've made some edits. You can take a look. Thank you. Lin Ling didn't know what else to say other than thank you. She felt a pang of guilt. This author, whom she once admired, was being blackmailed and exploited by her, yet Liu Yan still treated her with kindness. She was even generous enough to edit and improve the manuscript herself. A long silence stretched between them, and after a while, Liu Yan spoke again. "Did you see it?" The sudden question caught Lin Ling off guard. "What?" "The news. I was attacked with sulfuric acid, and Pu Lizha immediately shielded me. The media praised our deep bond as a couple, saying it was moving." "I saw." Liu Yan blinked and suddenly turned her gaze toward Lin Ling, smiling sarcastically. He always knows how to play the role so well. She laughed increasingly exaggeratedly, almost to the point of being unsettling. When we left that day, he slapped me because I didn't wear the lipstick he picked out for me. He controlled the force, so it hurt, but no one could see any marks. You know, he used to be a surgeon, so he knows a thing or two about this. Lin Ling was too shocked to say anything. "Weren't you always curious about why I look for other men outside?" "Because," she paused for dramatic effect, as though to build some suspense, "our relationship has long been broken." Still processing her previous words, Liu Yan revealed an even more terrifying secret. "I once killed our child." Everything started with that lost child. 2 years ago, I got pregnant. After being married for so long, we had been wanting a child, and finally, our wish came true. We were both so happy, and he treated me even better. But because of the pregnancy, my emotions became very unstable. We fought every day, endlessly. At first, he tolerated it all, but everyone has their limits. He couldn't stand it anymore, and after throwing some things on the floor, he left the house. And then I waited for him all night. He didn't answer his phone or reply to messages. I couldn't find him anywhere. In my frustration, I felt like there were bugs crawling all over me. I just couldn't take it anymore, so I drank some alcohol. She started crying. My stomach started hurting, so I called an ambulance. When I woke up, the baby was gone. The doctor said it was the alcohol that caused my uterus to contract, and I miscarried. By the time Liu Yan finished speaking, she seemed much calmer. Pu Lizha's love for her had vanished at that moment, yet he still pretended to forgive her, trying to cover it all up as if nothing had happened. He often hit her. Maybe it was because of a single word or a small gesture. If he wasn't happy, any violence seemed justified. That day when I came to see you, the bruise under the sunglasses was from him pushing me. Liu Yan looked at Lin Ling, whose expression seemed somewhat dazed. "Are you listening?" Lin Ling shivered violently, as if she had just woken up from a nightmare. Liu Yan's words reminded her of her own tragic childhood. The relationship between her parents was eerily similar. Her older brother had once drowned while swimming in a river due to her mother's neglect, and his body was never recovered. From that day on, her father hated everyone. He hated her mother, he hated Lin Ling, and he even hated himself. The slap landed mercilessly on her face, and in an instant, it felt like she was on fire. Liu Yan had once described this scene in her book. The dead memories awakened in Lin Ling, and it was then that she began to care for Liu Yan, a bond that quickly spiraled out of control. Having spilled the secrets she had kept buried in her heart, Liu Yan showed a glimmer of satisfaction on her face. Lin Ling, too, opened up about the painful memories from her childhood. Their relationship seemed to shift subtly. Lin Ling couldn't tell if it was just her perception, but it felt as if she and Liu Yan had become something more than acquaintances, like friends. Although Liu Yan had confided her secrets to Lin Ling, the relationship between them became much closer. However, the blackmailing did not stop. A week after leaving her villa, the third payment still hadn't arrived. Lin Ling was in agony. She and Liu Yan were no longer just in a blackmailing relationship, so her confidence in demanding money was fading. Perhaps something had delayed the payment, she speculated to herself. As she thought, she began to worry whether Liu Yan's husband had found out about her affair with another man, or if the two of them had argued about something else, and Pu Lizha had hit her again. Worrying was useless. Lin Ling's biggest concern now was herself. She had thought that after the first 40,000 was paid, they would allow a few more days. But to her surprise, it worked in the opposite direction. They were convinced that Lin Ling had money, and if they pushed harder, she would eventually give them all of it. When they cornered Lin Ling in a narrow alley near her home, that damned brother of hers was nowhere to be found, and when she called him, there was no response. The thugs were armed with knives and ropes, acting as viciously as murderers in a movie. "Give us the money." The leader, a burly man with a butcher-like appearance, grabbed her chin and spat at her, his breath rancid. He looked like he was about to choke Lin Ling to death. She struggled, but one of the thugs yanked her hair and threw her to the ground like a firecracker. A sharp ringing in her ears almost made her lose consciousness, but just enough clarity remained to hear the thugs cracking their knuckles, planning to continue torturing her. "Stop." Lin Ling thought she might be hearing things, but with great effort, she opened her eyes. The streetlight at the alley entrance dazzled her, and she couldn't make anything out clearly. "How much does she still owe you?" "I'll pay it all at once for her." It wasn't an illusion nor a dream. Someone had come to her rescue, and it wasn't her brother. It was Lu Yan. As soon as the thugs heard that there was money involved, their demeanor changed. They rattled off an account number, and Lu Yan transferred the remaining 40,000 right in front of them. When they saw the payment notification on their phones, the thugs finally quieted down and even respectfully called Lu Yan boss. "Get lost. Don't bother her again." The thugs reluctantly grabbed their weapons, muttering insults under their breath as they slunk away from the dim alley. "Are you okay?" Lu Yan helped Lin Ling up. Before she could ask, he explained, "I just left the cafe and heard a noise behind me. I turned in and saw them harassing you." The cafe was indeed right across from the alley, and Lu Yan's explanation was flawless. "Thank you." Her cheeks were wet, and Lu Yan handed her a tissue before gently smoothing her messy hair. Lin Ling rested her head on Lu Yan's shoulder, her breathing slowly calming down. She knew she was safe now. Back at home, Lin Ling quickly deleted all the files on her computer related to Lu Yan and her husband. She shut down the computer and let out a sigh of relief. Before going to bed, she sent Lu Yan a text. "Consider the money I owe you paid. I'll repay you." It seemed that they had really become friends. Lu Yan had kept her secrets for so long and now seemed eager to share. She talked about her secret relationship with a young man, her face turning red like a girl who had just experienced true love. "His birthday is coming up soon. Come with me to the mall to help me pick out a gift for him." Lin Ling spent the entire afternoon with her, arm in arm, as they browsed the stores. In the end, Lu Yan chose a watch worth over 100,000. Lin Ling watched her fall deeper in love, but she couldn't help but worry. Lu Yan was so generous with her feelings, but this could easily backfire. She might end up getting hurt a second time. "You always be cautious. Don't let yourself be deceived." Lu Yan looked at her and laughed lightly. "I've been deceived so many times that now I can tell if someone is lying just by looking into their eyes." "Really?" Lu Yan nodded, still smiling. She looked so confident. Seeing her expression, Lin Ling suddenly felt a pang of sympathy. "Let's go. I have to celebrate his birthday tonight." Lu Yan tugged at her arm and then asked, "Do you want to come with me? I'll pass on the two of you having your alone time." Lin Ling let go of Lu Yan's arm and returned home on her own. She suddenly felt exhausted and collapsed into bed, falling into a deep sleep, only to wake up around noon the next day. When she opened her eyes, she could barely see, her body feeling as if it were nailed to the bed, unable to move. There was a sound coming from the living room. She hoarsely called out, "Zhang Yan, Zhang Yan, bring me a glass of water." After almost 5 minutes, the bedroom door finally opened, and her brother entered with a look of annoyance, holding a glass of water. "All you do is boss me around." As Lin Ling reached out to take the cup, she saw that Zhang Yan was wearing a brand new Rolex watch on his wrist. She recognized the watch. It was the one she had helped Lu Yan pick out yesterday. Zhang Yan, yesterday was your birthday, and I didn't even wish you a happy birthday. You're crazy. I don't celebrate birthdays. Zhang Yan turned around, giving her a suspicious glance. She silently took the cup, watching Zhang Yan as she quietly smiled. Big sis, are you okay? Zhang Yan spat out his betel nut, looking at her with confusion. Zhang Yan, I've already paid off Dad's debts. Stop continuing to deceive Lu Yan. When Lin Ling had just turned 18, her father tricked her into signing as a guarantor for a loan shark's promissory note. After her father passed away, the massive debt fell onto her shoulders, almost suffocating her. Her brother, Zhang Yan, had always lived with their mother and only moved to Linling City after graduation to rent a place with her. Originally, the debt had nothing to do with Zhang Yan because their parents had divorced years ago, and he had left with their mother long before. But Zhang Yan couldn't bear to see Lin Ling being driven to the brink by debt collectors. One day, he came back and told her that he had a way to get money. By then, Lin Ling had already realized that this was all part of a trap set by Lu Yan's husband, Pu Lizhe. He wanted to divorce Lu Yan but didn't want to share the family assets, so he had approached Zhang Yan. He instructed him to seduce Lu Yan with the aim of making her cheat and thus become the guilty party in a divorce. Once he could prove she had cheated, he would file for divorce and force Lu Yan to walk away with nothing. One day, Lin Ling accidentally saw her brother and Lu Yan entering a hotel together. In that moment, an evil thought crossed her mind. Seeing the glamorous woman in front of her, a respected and successful author, Lin Ling couldn't help but feel envious. Why did she have such a life? While Lin Ling could only hide behind a trash can, enduring the stench and filth like a rat in the sewer, constantly on the run. Her only wish in life was to have her own novel published. But no matter how hard she tried, she always hit a wall. Lu Yan, who was standing before her, might be able to help her. Lin Ling had already made up her mind to take photos of Zhang Yan and Lu Yan and use them to blackmail her into helping publish her book. This wasn't something that would be difficult for Lu Yan. As for Pu Lizhe's conspiracy, it had nothing to do with Lin Ling's plan. It was simply a parallel line to her own. What did their marital problems have to do with her? Days passed, and as she spent more time with Lu Yan, Lin Ling found herself regretting her decision. Big sis, don't get involved in my matters. Lin Ling threw the cup in her hand to the floor, the glass shattering. If you continue to deceive Lu Yan, I'll tell her the truth. She expected Zhang Yan to be intimidated, but he just shrugged and said, It's too late. What do you mean? Just now, I've already sent all the photos and videos of my time with Lu Yan to that bald guy. I'm sorry. I know saying sorry won't change anything, but I still want to apologize. I'm sorry, Lu Yan, I lied to you. From the day I took those photos of you, I knew it was a trap set by Pu Lizhe. He had Zhang Yan get close to you just to get evidence of your affair, so he could divorce you and ruin your reputation. I know all of this because Zhang Yan is my brother, and he's nothing but a pawn in Pu Lizhe's game. Please don't blame him. I'll take care of everything. By the time Lu Yan received this message, Lin Ling had already gone to meet Pu Lizhe, as agreed. Even though she knew the man might have bad intentions, she still chose to meet him. She had the leverage in her hands, so she was confident he wouldn't dare to harm her. The meeting was scheduled for the evening, and she arrived early. The dilapidated building set to be demolished stood empty, dust rising in the breeze. In the distance, the sunset seemed to be covered in a thin mist, making it look blurry and unreal. Lin Ling suddenly remembered the evening she had seen Lu Yan months ago, when they met under that clear, brilliant sunset. You called me here. What do you want? The voice of Pu Lizhe came from behind her. Lin Ling turned around and saw him standing less than 5 meters away. Her heart raced, and she felt uneasy, but she still maintained a tough exterior. She said to him, Stop hurting Lu Yan. If you want to divorce her, you don't need to use such despicable methods. Pu Lizhe sneered, his face full of contempt. Who the hell are you to talk terms with me? If you try to use Zhang Yan and Lu Yan's affair to frame her, I will expose everything to everyone. I'll tell them this is all part of your conspiracy. How much money do you want? Even at this point, Pu Lijia's face remained unchanged. He believed Lin Ling was just another outsider trying to profit from the situation. Her little sympathy didn't matter when weighed against his desires. I don't want money. I want Lu Yan to get everything that rightfully belongs to her. Pu Lija laughed again, this time with a hint of madness. What a dream you're having. That's impossible. As soon as he finished speaking, his smile vanished, and his eyes flashed with menace. I've already given you a chance. Since you don't want money, then I'll just take your life. Lin Ling had been too naive, underestimating the limits of desire. She never imagined that the university professor who spoke so eloquently on camera would actually harbor murderous intent. He was far more terrifying than those debt collectors. He hunched his back and slowly approached her, like a wild dog stalking its prey. Lin Ling trembled as she reached into her pocket for the folding fruit knife she had brought for self-defense. Her hands shook so badly that she couldn't even unfold the blade. By then, Pu Lija had already lunged at her. He grabbed her neck with a vice-like grip, using all his strength to choke her. Lin Ling instantly felt her breath cut off, tears streaming down her face. She struggled, but her hands and feet were useless. Her life was slipping away, and like the fading sunset in the distance, her vision grew weak. She saw the last glimmer of light on the horizon flickering, then fading into nothingness. Lin Ling. The call from a distance startled Lin Ling, and she felt the grip on her neck loosen for a brief moment. Suddenly, the sound of sirens pierced the air. Pu Lija looked up and saw a group of people emerging from the ruins. They surrounded him like a fishing net. Lu Yan was behind the police officers, watching the scene unfold, shouting Lin Ling's name. She had her phone in her hand, and the sound of the camera shutter clicking was drowned out by the wind, unnoticed by anyone nearby. Due to prolonged lack of oxygen, Lin Ling fell into a coma. In the ambulance, Lu Yan tightly held her hand, her eyes filled with an undeniable pain that no one could fake. News about Pu Lija flooded the internet, with many speculations about why he would attack a woman. The truth was perfectly concealed. Even Lu Yan, who had shared the photos of the crime scene, couldn't fully open up to the online community about what really happened. After falling into a coma, Lin Ling burned with fever for 3 entire days and nights. She was in and out of consciousness, trapped in many nightmares, some involving Pu Lija, others about her father. In one dream, her father's large hand came down on her, and his fierce, twisted face suddenly morphed into Pu Lija's. From the day Lu Yan confided in her about being abused, Lin Ling had known that she could never live a peaceful life. The memories of being beaten by her father in childhood resurfaced when she saw the scars on Lu Yan's body. Those painful memories awakened, and she realized that Lu Yan had been so kind to her. She was her benefactor. Lin Ling knew she had to save her. She had to. During the 3 days and nights of fever, Lin Ling briefly woke up once. The moment her eyes opened, she saw Lu Yan sitting by her bedside. She tried to stretch out her hand, wanting to call her name, but her throat ached too much to make a sound. Seeing her wake up, Lu Yan immediately embraced her and said a simple, "Thank you. I've already found a publisher for you. They've agreed to publish your book." In that moment, Lin Ling felt that everything she had done was worth it. She took the contract Lu Yan handed her, still feeling dizzy, but she signed her name in the spot she was pointed to. The long night passed, and Lu Yan told her how she had found them. "I saw your message and knew you were in danger. I contacted the police immediately. Luckily, I had installed a tracking system on Pu Lija's phone before, so I was able to pinpoint your location quickly." Lin Ling nodded, resting her head on Lu Yan's shoulder. Her voice was especially soothing, and as Lu Yan whispered gently to her, she drifted back to sleep. This time, she no longer had nightmares. When she woke up again, she never saw Lu Yan again. Lin Ling tried calling Lu Yan, but no one answered. On the last night before her discharge, she once again watched the news channel at the coffee shop. The familiar host continued reporting on social issues. Breaking news in the case of the suicide of a second-year graduate student from Huayan Medical College. The deceased's private Weibo account was revealed, showing she had been subjected to long-term harassment and molestation by her mentor. Pu Lizhe, a well-known scholar, was the deceased's mentor and is now under police investigation. The screen played footage of Pu Lizhe from past interviews, and suddenly, Lin Ling had a realization. She grabbed her phone and called Lu Yan frantically. Still, there was no response. It was as if she held onto a single thread, following it in a desperate attempt to piece together the truth from a pile of ignored details. On the day of her discharge, Zhang Yan came to pick her up. The brother and sister remained silent the entire time. It wasn't until they were in the car that Lin Ling finally couldn't hold back and asked in a hoarse voice, "Are you still in contact with Lu Yan?" When Zhang Yan heard the name, he paused for a moment before shaking his head. No contact. But after Pu Lizhe was arrested, she did reach out to me. I thought she was going to confront me about the truth. Wasn't she? Lin Ling asked. Zhang Yan shook his head. No, she wasn't angry at all. In fact, she seemed very happy. She even gave me some money and thanked me. She's crazy. Lin Ling knew that Lu Yan was not crazy, but why would she thank the accomplice of Pu Lizhe? The thread seemed to snap here. She had the driver stop, regardless of everything, and headed to the villa where Lu Yan had taken her before. The villa was empty, a for sale sign hung at the entrance. Lin Ling remembered the door lock's password. With a glimmer of hope, she entered it, and the door actually opened. Inside, the villa was eerily quiet. She walked up the stairs to Lu Yan's bedroom, but it was also empty, long abandoned. The only thing left was a few photos in the drawer. In the photos, Lu Yan was sitting in a cafe with a woman. Lin Ling didn't recognize the woman but felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. The cafe, the hospital, the news channel kept looping the same social issues report, and that woman's face appeared on the screen. The woman in the photo was the second-year graduate student who had fallen to her death. Lu Yan knew her? A flood of confusion filled Lin Ling's mind. The girl in the photo might be the key to everything. Holding the photo, Lin Ling went to the girl's university. Using her status as a victim of Pu Lizhe's abuse, she obtained the girl's mother's address. When she handed the photo to the grieving mother, all she received were tears and a broken truth. Lu Yan is a good person. After the incident, everyone thought her daughter was simply too weak to handle academic pressure and chose to take her own life. It was Lu Yan who found me and gave me my daughter's private Weibo account. She also handed over the evidence that the bastard had been abusing other girls. To escape Pu Lizhe, the girl had reached out to Lu Yan. By that point, she had been suffering from severe depression, wanting to die, but refusing to let the truth be buried. After learning the truth, Lu Yan helped my daughter a lot. She even installed a tracking system on Pu Lizhe's phone to gather more evidence of his crimes. Unfortunately, my daughter didn't live to see him punished. Looking at the woman, now sobbing uncontrollably, Lin Ling felt a chill run down her spine. After the tragedy, why did Lu Yan wait so long before telling the girl's mother about the private Weibo account? Was she waiting for something? Or did something unexpected happen, forcing her to delay exposing the truth? Back home, Lin Ling suddenly remembered the publishing contract Lu Yan had made her sign while she was in the hospital. She dug through her bag and pulled out the stack of papers, the cover clearly labeled, "Copyright Transfer." It was as though she were a balloon, inflating with every discovery she made in her quest for the truth, thinking she would explode at any moment from the pressure. But to her surprise, she deflated quietly. It turned out that the unexpected twist, the one that forced her to hold back on revealing Pu Lizhe's true nature, was herself. Everything had been part of Lu Yan's plan. She had installed the tracker on Pu Lizhe's phone, so she knew exactly who he was meeting and what he was doing. How could she not know that Pu Lizhe had hired Zhang Yan to harm her? Lu Yan had deliberately let her fall into the trap so she could lower his guard and, in turn, gather more evidence to bring Pu Lizhe down. It had all been part of her plan, with one unexpected factor: Lin Ling. Lin Ling had unexpectedly blackmailed her with photos of herself and Zhang Yan, throwing a wrench in her perfectly orchestrated plan. The plan wasn't ready and no accidents could happen in the meantime. Liu Yan agreed to meet with Lin Ling, taking her to her secret base, helping her deal with the debt collectors again and again. She sought to befriend her. The reason? She had another goal in mind. She had set her sights on the book Lin Ling had written and wanted to take it for herself. That day, when Lin Ling briefly woke up, Liu Yan made her sign a contract. In her dazed state, Lin Ling signed it without even reading it, trusting Liu Yan completely. The contract wasn't a publishing agreement. It was a copyright transfer agreement. For 800,000 yuan, the novel was hers. It was worth it. But there was one more thing Liu Yan had lied to Lin Ling about. She had told Lin Ling that the reason her relationship with Pu Lizha had fallen apart was because of a miscarriage after an argument and drinking. But the truth was far different. The child had never been lost due to alcohol. It was something Liu Yan had terminated on her own. After Pu Lizha hit her for the first time, she knew she couldn't keep the child. Aborting the baby meant she would have nothing tying her down. No one could hurt her anymore. The reason she lied to Lin Ling? Perhaps it was simply professional habit. She was a novelist, after all. She needed to craft the story's twists and turns. How could she move Lin Ling if she didn't tell it that way? It was just the tragic narrative she was accustomed to telling. The thread in her hand finally pieced together all the broken fragments into a complete picture. She suddenly realized that perhaps, before completely cutting off contact, proactively seeking out Zhang Yan and the photos in the villa, all these key clues had been deliberately placed into her hands by Liu Yan. She wanted her to understand the cause and effect. If you did something wrong, you deserve to be punished. After learning the truth, Lin Ling fell into a deep depression for a while. Every day, she waiting for Liu Yan to publish the novel under her own name. But for some reason, there was never any news. The copyright transfer contract quietly sat in Lin Ling's bag. She no longer had the courage to look for Liu Yan, and her social networks had unfollowed her. In Liu Yan's plan, no one was entirely innocent, not even herself. Sometimes, Lin Ling would still dream of Liu Yan. She dreamed of the two of them talking about ideals and literature in a cafe, with the setting sun in the distance. She had so many dreams, but she didn't want to live in them anymore. She found a job in a neighboring city and was set to start next month. While preparing to move, she pulled all the books that Liu Yan had written from the bookshelf, those books that had once supported her through many tough moments. Now that the hardship was over, it was time to start fresh. "Are you not taking these books with you?" Zhang Yan asked her. "No, I'm not." Just as she finished packing, there was a knock at the door. A courier had arrived. She opened the expedited package, only to be stunned. It was a contract and a photograph. Liu Yan had actually sent back the copyright transfer contract she had signed in a daze. Along with the contract was a photo. The last rays of the setting sun cast a warm glow over the misty mountains in the distance. At the foot of the mountains stood large mushroom-shaped houses, and the terraced fields extended into the valley below, where cattle egrets perched on trees. It was the utopian world Lin Ling had written about in her novel, the same place she had grown up in. On the back of the photo was a note, which read, "When you receive this photo, I will have already started my next journey. After much thought, I believe our relationship is not just one of mutual use. There is some genuine affection between us. You threw yourself to save me, and I owe you. So, I've returned your book to you. Oh, and by the way, a publisher will be in touch with you next week. Please treat them well."